Hi, welcome to a special episode of TFT Hyperroll from Mission for Tuition. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff for the algorithm, because this channel was created since our son has to go to a special school, which is frightfully expensive, and we make some money from ad revenue. We don't ask for donations or anything like that. It's just views. So if you could help us get more views by adding to the YouTube algorithm, that would be awesome. With the new season dropping on 11/3, I wanted to use this time to do my final 5 Hyperroll builds for this season. It's important for me to say that this is not the 5 best builds right now or anything like that. With Hyperroll, I find the builds all stay pretty relevant if you have the right items on the right champions. So any of the previous videos I made will still be valid if you learn those comps. This is just 5 more comps I think you should have in your arsenal and ready to use in Hyperroll. And with that, let's get started. And you've probably figured out by now, this first build is Sentinels. While I personally don't recommend trying to force Sentinels from the beginning, you can if you want to pick up a Sentinel with a key item, such as a Senna with a recursive bow. Given the high cost of the late game Sentinels, I much prefer to look for a clear sign from the RNG gods that the game is going to be friendly to Sentinels. Look for getting a Recon out of the NPC round, or at minimum a 2-star Irelia and 2-star Senna, and preferably an Olaf so you can go forward with strength. Your main carry in Sentinel is almost always going to be Lucian, and the goal is to have a healing item on him, such as Hand of Justice or Bloodthirster. Last Whisper or the Eternal Whisper is absolutely essential, and then a damage item, such as Deathblade, Infinity Edge, or Giant Slayer can all work, with my preference being the Deathblade. For item holders, you can use someone like Olaf or any other Cannoneer who you've picked up along the way. Your goal is to save money so that when you get to 7, you can roll down, find your Lucian, and transfer the items over to Lucian so that he can now take over the real damage aspects of the game. Remember, itemization is absolutely key, the Last Whisperer probably being the most important item, because that will allow Lucian to shred armor, making everyone more susceptible. Galio is ultimately going to be your main tank, so once you find him, get everything you can on him so he can hold the aggro away from your carries. As long as he's holding things in place, it will allow Lucian to do a ton of damage, and again with that Last Whisper, he will be shredding armor, which will allow your entire teams to succeed even when it doesn't look possible. Sometimes the game betrays you and doesn't give you exactly what you're looking for, but there are other potential carries such as Olaf. Remember, your goal is just to get into the top 4. You don't have to win every single time. If you get an Olaf, look for items like Deathblade, Titan's Resolve, Guardian Angel, things like that, because he will just do a ton of damage as he goes. And while my personal favorite is to end up with a screen looking something like this with 6 Sentinels, 4 Cannoneers, and 2 Knights, this is not necessarily the only way to go. Really, it's the itemization on Lucian or whoever your carry is that's going to make the biggest difference. This, I feel, is the strongest way to put this together, but don't be afraid to go other routes, such as 6 Sentinels and then other front lines such as Renewers, Ironclads, and just 2 Cannoneers. Lucian is going to win you the game and lead you to victory if it is to be, but again, just top 4 is good enough. But now, let's move on to our second build, which is Legionnaire. And this one is pretty easy to try and force if you want to from the very start. There are actually lots of potential carries and different ways to get there. For example, you can start off with an Atrox with a chain vest. If you decide to go that route, it absolutely can work. You just load lots of Titan's Resolves onto Atrox. Hopefully you get him up to gold, and he will start cleaning house because he becomes nearly immortal in that situation. But this is a risky way to go because you're counting on gold Atroxes, and you need the Titan's Resolve so he heals to full after each ult. A slightly more reliable way to go is to pick up a Callisto with a key item such as a Sparring Glove, which is useful in Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, etc. Since your Legionnaires are generally squishy, the key to them is to having a combination of Last Whisper and Infinity Edge to reduce the other team's armor so that you can get through them quickly. If Callista's an item holder, that's great. She can transfer those items to Draven, or if you can get her up to gold, she can absolutely carry. Ultimately, Legionnaire is a very versatile comp with lots of different carry options. You can have Callista or Draven as the ultimate carries with some form of Last Whisper, a healing item, and preferably an Infinity Edge. Or you can go with either Yasuo or Riven with a Rapid Fire Cannon, a Hand of Justice, and a Runaan's Hurricane, so they're hitting multiple targets. Finally, if you get to it, you can end up with a Kayle, and the perfect items are Rage Blade, Death Blade, and Guardian Angel. It all depends on what items you get and what champions you have access to, but Legionnaire is a very solid comp if you get the right champions with the right items. And now it's time to move on to our next build. And for some reason I've completely forgotten what it is. What could it be? Oh yeah, it's Forgotten. Sorry, I apologize, dad joke, but I absolutely had to do it because, well, I'm a dad and it's required. So with Forgotten, you can go for it right off the bat if you get a champion like Vayne, and you can just hope to end up with a 3-star Vayne and just take over from there. Ultimately, if you go that route, unless you get the perfect Vayne items, you're probably not looking for a first place, but you're just looking to get into the top 4 as you fill out to get to 6 Forgotten. In this case, I ended up with Hand of Justice and a Jeweled Gauntlet to help her with her ult, but with the additional Ranger buff and a Hecarim, if you have good items on them, you will do really well with this. Generally, if I'm going Forgotten, I like to use Draven as my carry, and that would be some form of Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, and then a healing item. It's not necessary in a Draven Legionnaire build because the healing is part of the Legionnaire comp, but with Forgotten, you're going to need some way for Draven to get his health back. Item holders for Draven can be almost any ranged unit. Sometimes I like to use Vayne because you should be able to find enough of them that you'll be able to replace the one you're taking out, and ultimately Vayne becomes just fodder in the fight because you're not counting on her to really be doing the damage. And while I do highly recommend it, a healing item is not absolutely positively necessary. If you have a strong enough front line, which is usually built around Hecarim, Draven can get an additional damage item so he can tear through things really quickly. As you can see here, a Death Blade will allow him to keep doing massive amounts of damage and take down another team. If you do manage to get lucky enough to get the perfect Vayne items, these are them. You want lots of Runaan's Hurricanes and a Rage Blade, because Vayne will hit really hard on a lot of targets. You can do this with 4 Forgottens and 4 Knights, or 6 Forgottens and 2 Knights. Either way will work really well and can carry you all the way to victory. And with that, it's time to forget about Forgotten, sorry, had to do it one last time, and move on to our next build, which is usually known as Rats, or otherwise called Hellions. You're best off to start your Hellion build straight from the carousel, picking up a Hellion with an item that you ultimately want to use on that Hellion, because you're going to be rolling fast and furious to try to get to 3-star champions as quickly as possible. You have a variety of different carries you can use, including Kled, Ziggs, Tristana, or if you get really lucky and everything works out, you can ultimately use a Teemo. But let's not talk about extreme cases, let's just look at what you're likely to be able to build off the jump. My personal favorite right now is to go with a Ziggs Spellweaver combination, whether that's getting to 8 Hellions and 2 Spellweavers, or getting to 6 Hellions and 4 Spellweavers. It turns Ziggs into an absolute destructive force. You want an Archangel Staff, a Jeweled Gauntlet, and then some type of mana item such as Spear of Hirana or Blue Buff. But as I mentioned before, Kled can also be used. A Warmogs is probably one of the better items to get onto Kled, along with a Hand of Justice so he has some healing. In this particular match, I got the Radiant Guardian Angel, which worked really well, but any really good damage item, or even a Runaan's Hurricane, can do well for Kled because of his damage buffs and attack speed buffs. Really important things to know in any Hellion build is if you see a recursive bow, grab it, because that is the key to making the Hellion emblem. Further, it's very competitive right now. Lots of people are going for it. If you see a lot of Hellions being taken in your lobby, abandon ship and try for something else. If you can get it, it could very well lead you to victory. And with that, it is time to move on to our next build, which, as you can see right now, is going to be Assassins. I've done some form of assassin build in all of my comps you should know videos, and the reason for that is that it is an incredibly strong comp if you get the right champions and the right items. The main champion I like to use is Nocturne, and the 3 key items are Infinity Edge, Last Whisper, and Ginsu's Rageblade, or any of their Radiant equivalents. He just becomes unstoppable in that scenario. But Nocturne is not the only way to go. If you're feeling lucky and you want to try to force it, you can try to go Chugbug, which involves getting yourself to a gold Kha'Zix and hopefully a gold Gragas as well. If you decide to go this route, you want Rapid Fire Cannon, Hand of Justice, and Infinity Edge on Kha'Zix. This will make him incredibly strong, and then you fill in with Dawnbringers for extra healing and 4 Assassins so you can trigger the buff. Your frontline for Assassin is fairly variable. You can go with a Revenant frontline, or a Knight frontline, or a Brawler frontline. All of them are going to hold people in place, while your backline, your Assassins, are going to take them out. Positioning is going to be very important, so make sure you pay attention to where your opposing players' champions are. But one of the things I like best about Assassins is how well it's able to pivot over to other builds. If you've noticed, in 4 of the 5 builds we did today, Last Whisper is a key item and often Infinity Edge as well. Assassins use that at the beginning and as quickly as possible. So if it's not filling in, you're able to move over to a comp, such as one of the earlier ones, that will use those same items. But since this is set 5.5, I want to give another little half build that I like to use anytime I get a chance. If I see a spatula, I want to grab the Vladimir. How did I miss that? But anyway, the goal is to get to 6 Renewers. This is a really troll build when you can make it work. And there are lots of different combinations, such as this Renewer Draven that just decided to take over. Obviously, I also have a 3-star gold Nunu, but having Draven as this Renewer, because I couldn't find a Heimer, it just made things even more fun when I ended up knocking people out. But if you do get that initial spatula off the carousel, I do suggest looking to go into Renewer because it is incredibly strong. You can use Vladimir as your carry if you get some Archangel staffs and a Warmock's Pride, he will become almost unkillable. Or if you can get the Renewer buff onto Nunu and use Brawlers, again, he will become almost unkillable and you'll just be able to romp through the competition all the way to victory. I hope you enjoyed this video and the comps inside, and they help you in this final month on the road to Hyper. You have an absolutely awesome day.